Welcome to Brothers on the Board, the podcast where we become better teachers together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Brothers on the Board. This is episode 8, and today we are talking all about parent-teacher interaction. My name is John, and as always, I'm joined here by my brother Wes. We're two teachers who, for whatever reason, spends our free time doing this. This is fun for us, so we hope that you take something away from this, and we're hoping to have a really good discussion today about what we can do to communicate with parents more reasonably, and also to kind of give some ideas of what parents maybe can do to help teachers out to some degree. So, Wes, here we go, man. Episode 8, we've made it. We're getting closer to 10.
We've done it.
We're getting closer to 10.
Yeah, we're getting there. Getting there.
So,
for sure.
How many phone calls did you make this week, Wes?
How many? I made 4 phone calls home this week.
4 phone calls home. That's, you know what? I'll be honest. You beat me. I didn't make that many phone calls home. I did.
How many emails home did you do?
0. I did zero emails home this week. Which, to be fair, I am the tardy person for my team. So if I'm not sending emails home, that's normally a good thing. I want to point that out for our team and for myself. That's normally a good thing. I did.
What do you mean tardy person?
So on our team, we have our team anyway, we have one person who kind of deals with all the tardies. So myself and my co-teacher, because there's 2 of us in the room, I spend the first 3 minutes or so out in the hallway, just hall sweeping, getting people in class, making sure no one's late. And if they're late, then I'm the one that lets them in the room so that the teacher doesn't have to let them in or it doesn't interrupt their class. So I let them in and I take their name down and then I go and I put them in the system.
That is wild. We do not have that.
I don't think most of our teams do. It works really well for us though, because you're never really interrupted and you never have to worry about putting people in tardy or anything like that. So, this year our school went to 3 minutes instead of 4 between bells, and it is a long walk. It is a long walk from band to my room. So I try to be reasonable and get them in and just be like, hey, just get in there. And other teachers know that too. So, but yeah, I take care of the tardies. So no emails from Mr. Howard is normally a good thing. But I did make a handful, 2 or 3 positive calls, phone calls, this week that I thought went really well. And I also ran into one of my students at Sephora in the mall. It's like I've been at this school for 10 years, and I've ran into maybe 4 or 5 kids out in the wild, like randomly. So I'm in Sephora with my wife, and I'm walking around. She's shopping, and then I see one of them. I'm like, target acquired. So I just get behind her. I'm wearing a hat, so she has no idea it's me, and I'm just kind of following her and her mom through the store. And then finally, randomly, I just go, I'm just going to follow you until you realize that I'm here. And she turns around. She goes, oh, my God, it's Mr. Howard. And her mom was standing there, and I spoke to her mom for a few minutes, but I kept it, super positive. I was like, man, I want to make sure I don't share anything negative that she's done over the last few days, because how bad would that suck that you get, ruin your trip to the mall because you happen to randomly run into me, ruin your weekend, I'm taking your phone or just something crazy. So I did run into a kid at the mall. So that's a parent.
We're counting that, right? We're counting that as a parent interaction.
100%. That was that's you know what? I was like, you were scheduled for parent teacher conferences, and I crossed you off already. But no, it was.
I ran into a former student I had probably 5 years ago. I was holding the door for her and her mom when they came out of Chili's the other day, and she didn't even recognize me at first. And I just said, how's it going? And she looked at me and she goes, oh my God, it's Mr. Howard. And I was like, yeah, it's been a while since 6th grade, hasn't it?
It happens, man. I have kids all the time that are like, you remember me? I'm like, I remember your face. I have a hard time with the name, but I remember the face. So It happens. But yeah, I made a couple of phone calls this week. I thought it went pretty good. But today we're going to be talking about parent-teacher interaction. How can we as teachers sort of have more positive conversations with parents? What can we do that's efficient with our time to communicate with parents? And we're going to go over a survey. So I want to say a huge, huge thank you to everyone who's listening that filled out our little survey on Facebook. We were asking parents or teachers that are parents, just parents in general, a handful of questions. I tried to keep it really short and really sweet. I didn't want it to be something that would take 10, 15 minutes of your time. I wanted it to be something quick, just to get a really fast snapshot of parents' interactions with teachers over the course of their child's educational career. And I found first off, I got more results than I thought I would. We got a decent amount of results. Now, I want to point out it's nothing statistically significant, but I think it does offer some insight for just discussion. So, before we start looking at that, I do want to say just a quick disclaimer. This in no way is reflective of any one school district. So, if you know me or places I've worked or anything like that, just please understand that this is not reflective of any one of those school districts. This is a snapshot across just our social media channels, could be from a number of school districts. So just want to make sure that that is understood. So let's get into it. The survey had 3 questions. The first question said, in general, during your child or children's school career, how often have their teachers communicated their progress with you? So I was interested to see whether or not they considered their communication satisfactory. Was it not so good? So the options were very well, satisfactory, rarely, or I never hear anything. So the biggest portion of it, 44%, was satisfactory. Wes, what do you think? Does that surprise you that it's 44% satisfactory, or would you expect it to be higher or lower? Where are you at with that?
No, I feel like that's a pretty good. I mean, I would expect it to be a little higher probably. I was thinking more like 60%, 70% satisfactory, but so I guess it's a little bit lower, a little bit shocking to me.
Okay. Well, 29% said rarely, and 14% says I never hear anything, which we're going to hear in just a little while. Maybe no news is good news. I mean, in some cases, I think some parents would agree with that. I know that myself, who has a 4-year-old, I know that if I don't hear anything from his daycare when I go to pick him up, because I mean, basically his preschool, if I don't hear anything, it's like, okay, he must have been tolerable at nap time today. Must not have been that bad, because when I go in and they're already motioning for me to come over and talk to them, I'm like, well, nap time didn't go good today. So I think in some cases, no news is good news. And so I think we have to look at this and say, well, 8.8% of people saying I never hear anything, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I guess, and also I'm coming at it from a different perspective. So I'm guessing it's the perspective you're coming at it from, because in general, during your child/children's school career, how often have their teachers communicated their progress with you? I consider term grades a communication of progress. So to have never heard anything, that's strange, but maybe they are thinking more of specific emails directly about your specific, other than those term grades.
I don't think this is like report cards, right? I think this is in the middle of the quarter, not just grades, but social, emotional, hey, they're struggling to make friends, or they so-and-so said something really nice about so-and-so today. I think there's a lot of things there is a lot of ways you can take that, right? So,
yeah.
And also the question isn't necessarily worded towards do you wish that your parents or your teachers would have communicated better with you, right? It doesn't say that. It just says how often have they. So, yeah, I think that's it's okay. 44% satisfactory. Again, there's so many different angles that you can come at this with. And also you have to imagine that some parents are like, hey, you know what? As long as my kid's grades seem good on report cards and no news is good news. I'm fine, right? I think that that's probably the case. All right, and we'll get into this in just a minute in terms of what we can do to try to communicate, um, and communicate better with parents. And actually, that's something we could get into right now. So, what are some ways that are efficient for teachers? So, like myself and you included, like, what are some ways that we can communicate with parents that just doesn't take your entire evening, right? So, like, you can't make phone calls to every kid every day or even every week or even every month. I mean, I have like 100 kids, right? So it's really difficult to get through everyone. So, like, what are some ways that we can have conversations or just send a little tidbit here and there of how their kid is doing? Do you have any specific kind of ideas that we could share?
So yeah, I think the the idea of mastery learning uh, really comes into play here, where you could you know put the student at like a 1, 2, 3 like mastery developing um, close to mastery or
Yeah, like
mastery.
skilled or whatever.
Yeah, skilled, however you want to
Yeah.
word it. I know like developing near mastery. Mastery is usually the
Yeah.
go to, and then like you know do an email to all students who are at that one point in whatever unit you're on, and just in a like a mass email. Hey, just letting you know your student is developing right now. They should be near mastery at this point. Um, so grouping them into like an email maybe would be one way that I
Hmm.
could see doing that. And I've toyed with that in my head. I'm a pretty big proponent. Now my school is not doing mastery right now, but that's something we have considered.
Okay.
So
So, not necessarily on behavior or anything like that. We're talking like how well they're doing on any specific learning target or standard or something like that.
yeah, because the way the question is worded again for me is communicated their progress with you.
Sure.
We're talking about progress. Are we talking about behavior progress?
We're talking about practice. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a Allen Iverson reference. I don't know if you would know that, but anyways,
Uh,
go.
nope.
Yeah, you would know that. Go.
We're right on the
Yeah,
head on
yeah. I
that
figured
one.
it would. Um, so, anyways, when I made the question, I don't think I had any specific thing in mind in terms of whether it was behavior, whether it was academic. I think it was just kind of a mixture of both, just in terms of how often a parent has reached out to you just to talk about your kid individually, right? Um, and it could have been a bit of both, right? Like when I call a parent, I don't just say, "Well, I'm just calling to talk about behavior," right? While I'm on the phone with you, we're having a chat about if they have all A's, but they're being a little bit of a jerk in class, right? I don't just call and say, "Hey, they're being a jerk. Tell them to get it together," right? I'm going to bring up the fact that I mean academically they're doing really well. Like their work is really good, right? I'm talking about them as a whole. I'm not trying to like put a spotlight on any one thing typically. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, which we have also discussed. This is something that we thought about doing, and I think I really want to look in more into it. Is giving them like a behavior, not a grade necessarily, but something tied to behavior. So you would also, you could send, they're developing in academics. They're also developing in being safe, which is one of our like core things. STAR stands for safe, tolerant, accountable, respectful is what we go off of. And so, giving them a grade tied to that as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in terms of
So
we used to have the slogan like "Be safe, be kind, be responsible." Right. It's kind of that idea. So it's not really a
hmm
grade. It's kind of just a progress in terms of your social, emotional, behavior, kind of well being. Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Got it.
So like just a numerical way of
Sure.
tracking it.
So some other ways that I would recommend for people. I am a huge Class Dojo person. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. It's yes, this is seventh grade, and I know that Class Dojo is typically found more at the grade school level. And for my high school people that's listening, yeah, I don't know if it's not necessarily your kid's cup of tea because it is a little elementary, but having the ability to kind of post status updates, classroom kind of like a classroom Facebook page sort of is really nice. Also being able to reach out to parents individually. Parents can also see if you have them connected, they can see the percentage of like how many positive and negative points students have earned. They can see what they lost points for or what they gained points for. I think and when I reach out to parents, like if I'm not doing Dojo, which right now this year we've not been doing Dojo a ton just because we have a different program we're using. But when I reach out to parents, I have them all the time like, now are you on Dojo? Because their kids are coming from 6th grade and they're used to that. But I have them all the time asking about it because they love it. So I think that is something. Now there is other apps. I know one is called Remind that a lot of teachers use. Do you know people that use that?
Oh yeah, I've used a class Remind before.
Yeah.
It was it was when I was like teaching 6th grade, we had to have a lot more materials and stuff. So I was like sending home like reminds, like, hey, make sure you bring in 2-liter bottles or whatever it is that we were doing at the time. Yeah. So
we also, before we went digital, we had actual paper and pencil planners that they had to write in every day. It was like a requirement. You had to write in your planner. And some teachers would have they required parents to sign their planner each week or something. So they could write a little tiny note on the day so that the parents would know. So the parent would just have to initial the day saying, hey, I saw it. I think that's kind of cool. Obviously, you run into some issues with parents, and it's unbelievable that this is the case, but it's the world we live in. You have parents that are just so swamped at home that it's even something as simple as that is difficult, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But parents who are working different shifts, you have kids at 7th, 8th, 9th grade level who are taking care of little ones in the evenings for a little while when they get home. Like it's you have that. So I do think you have to be careful with that. And we will, again, get into that more in just a minute. So, and I think that's a good segue, actually, into our next question. Our next question is on the survey. This is question 2. Do you think schools should focus more on parent involvement, such as projects that require parents to participate? So, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago. And I don't think it was necessarily on the podcast, but you and I were talking about ways that you can get parents more involved with their kids' education, right? So I was curious to see whether or not that's something parents even wanted, right? So 48% just gave a flat out no. Like, no, I do not think that more should be required of parents. 22% said I'm indifferent. Like one way or the other, it doesn't matter to me. I can, we'll manage. And 29% said yes. So, initial thoughts. What are you thinking about that?
I mean, I feel like people are just so busy. They have just so many things going on that it's difficult for them to provide more time to that. So I'm not too shocked by that. Initially I was, but then I was like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. So I don't think it's, the question is obviously not like, would you want to participate more in your child's education, right? It's do you think that schools should focus more on parent involvement? So
I don't know. I'm actually kind of leaning toward most people being like, no, not necessarily that I don't want to participate, sort of maybe kind of what you're saying. It's not that I don't want to, it's just that I can't, right? I'm swamped with other things, and
too much to
do.
School
is a bit of a break for me to be able to get those things done. I can't afford to spend, X amount of time doing whatever project it is. So yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm not surprised really by that at all, to be honest. So let me get this out. I actually had another comment or another question. I said, if you want, and this is optional, you can give me ideas on how you think that basically teachers and parents should interact or anything like that. And I had one person who said, I would want teachers to know that we aren't trained as they have been. When it comes to homework, we may be able to do it ourselves, but to teach a child can be difficult at times depending on the subject. So, what do you think about that?
So I am gonna. This is we're coming in with a hot one on
Oh
this
no.
one. So I hope you're ready for this. This is a hot take, and I'm gonna say it, and I'm gonna
Oh
scream
God.
it
Okay, go ahead.
every time on this podcast. And people are not. There's gonna be in the comments. I want people to disagree with me. I hate homework.
Okay.
I said it. I hate it. I hate assign. I do not assign homework. I do not do it.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary. I don't find the value in it. There's research that suggests that it actually has a negative effect on relationships. It's not good. I don't like it.
I'm looking forward to people in the comments screaming, "Where's your research? Show me your peer-reviewed articles. Show me your research."
I can if you. Yeah, absolutely. I can provide that.
I will agree with you to a certain extent. I think that homework. I'll come around out and I'll say the same thing. I very, very rarely give homework. Very, very rarely. Homework really ends up being, did you finish it in class? If you didn't, then it's homework. Like you need to get it done now sometime, and it can't be in here. So, like that's what ends up being homework. So I do agree with you because, again, very similar to what we were just discussing earlier. Some kids, they're a bit more busy at home than they are at school. Some kids they work harder at home than they do at school, whether it's taking care of siblings, whether it's doing chores, whether it's helping their parents. That's the world we live in. And I know that when I get off work, I would prefer to have a life of my own as well. And I know that my students do as well. So I don't give a ton of homework. It ends up just being, again, did you get it done in class? So I do agree with that. But I will say, going back to our original question here, the part where they say that we aren't trained as they have been, I 100% agree with whoever this person is. And honestly, I take it kind of as a compliment because you hear a lot of people have this sentiment that teachers are just babysitters, right? As a teacher, I can say that you don't realize how much training you've had and how much you've learned until you watch someone who has never done it before. When you watch a brand new teacher, or when you watch, like, for example, I have a 4-year-old. So when I try to help him with his letters and with all this other stuff, it's a whole different beast. Like, I am not an elementary school teacher. I've never really worked with kids that are 4 and 5 years old outside of like a few little experiences, right? I have my degree is 7 through 12. So I'm not qualified to do that. So it's hard for me. It's hard for me to deal with that.
So, but in like 9 years, he doesn't even know what's coming. You're going to be implementing all the strategies.
I'm going to be golden then. Like, we're going to have learning targets and everything. Yeah, it's going to be great. But just the level of, and I know everyone says like, oh God, 7th grade, that sounds awful. But I mean, I love 7th grade, that personally. But I know that watching him trying to keep his attention for more than 5 seconds is like, it's like pulling teeth. It's like, how in the world, while I'm working with him, I'm like, how do people work with 20 of these kids? Like, how is this possible? I go in to pick him up from daycare. They've got them all like sitting on the rug. They're all working on their writing. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is incredible. So I do agree with this person's sentiment. It's really hard. Now, I know that there are people, though. There are people and who want to be more involved. So, like we just said, 29% of people said yes. So here's the question. How can we accommodate those people who want to be involved, yet maybe not make it mandatory? Any particular ideas on what we can do there?
Um, I mean, obviously, like non-mandatory parent-teacher conferences, right? Like if they want to sign up and come in and see what's going
It's kind
on.
of how ours are.
Participate. Yeah, we have some that we'll send an email and be like, hey, we would recommend you
Yeah,
sign
yeah,
up for
we do the
this,
same
but
thing. Yeah,
yeah. So, but like, I feel like that's something just like volunteering things. Like right now, I'm preparing for a science fair. We have our school as a whole does a thing called Showcase of
hmm,
Learning, where parents can come in. Like we open up the school to the parents to come in, and the students are supposed to showcase things that they have done in class, like in all their classes. So they like come around and get to see everything. And I have students who are doing a science fair, not mandatory, right? It doesn't affect their grade at all, but they're picking anything they want to do in science, like science related, and then they're doing an experiment about it. So I think things like that, where we are offering voluntary participation,
sure.
obviously, uh, that doesn't impact grades.
Okay.
So not sending home like projects that parents and students have to do necessarily
Yeah.
together. But
Or like a parent has to be at a function at school, right? Like that's difficult for a lot of parents who may have. You have parents who is like, okay, well, me and my husband have one car, and he works evening shifts. I can't get there, right? Like that's a
mhm.
reality. So one of the things that we did fairly recently, we've done it a few times over the years, is we wanted to try to increase parent engagement, and we came up with this idea that we wanted students to read out loud. We wanted them to do more reading. So we wanted them to read to their parents, right? Show their parents like how well they're doing or whatever. So we sent them, and this would help with like comprehension and fluency and those kinds of things. So we sent kids home with an article. I think we would like alternate. One week we would do like fiction, one week we would do nonfiction. So we sent them home with an article, and they were supposed to read it for so long. It didn't necessarily have to be the entire article, but they had to read for so long to an adult. Now, we said an adult, it was like, okay, well, if your parents can do it, if your parents are available, they're not swamped with work or taking care of siblings or whatever it was, then that would be great. Read to your parent out loud, answer the questions, and then they would sign it and you bring it back in. And then we would give them like PBIS points, which is kind of like I think you call them star tickets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or,
PBIS, positive behavior intervention
yes.
strategies.
So we would do that. Now, we told them that you could read to an adult. So it could be like a teacher, custodian, it could be the bus driver, it could be anybody who you can get to just listen for a minute or two, right? That was the goal. We wanted you to read to an adult that you respected or adult that you looked up to or something like that. So and we had some decent success with that of kids bringing that back in and trying to give them some kind of incentive to do so. So I think there's ways that we can have parents become more involved and not necessarily require it for a grade. Right. Now,
Yeah.
I spoke on Messenger on Facebook. Our aunt, she reached out, and I spoke to her, and she was like, you know what, I have a couple of ideas. She was a school counselor for like 20 some years. She was in the classroom for like 10 or 15 years. So she was in education in general for like 35 years. And she had some ideas that I thought was pretty cool. And one of them, she had like they had students come in. This was like an activity after school, and each kid had done a research project on a certain person in history, and they dressed up as this person. They researched them, and then parents came in and they would go around and speak to them, and they had to like tell them who they were, what they did in history that's significant, answer questions about them. Like they had to basically pretend to be them. And I was like, that would be super fun to watch, especially if it was like your whole team did it. So like in science class, the kids who had like science figures, they're all in there. People like Edgar Allan Poe is in, language arts, and this could be something that's completely voluntary, something for fun the kids want to do. The parents can come if they can. You know, you're not just talking to their parent, you're talking to, other parents are coming up and talking to them, asking them, "Okay, who are you?" and like, "What did you do?" and things like that. I was like,
Mhm.
that would be really cool. So, things
Mhm.
like that. Things where we can implement um just things like we said, not mandatory, but also just gets people involved and shows all the good things that we do in school because people don't always see it, right?
Yeah.
So, I thought that was really interesting. Definitely for the parents who are completely swamped and aren't able to participate in things. Trust me, I sympathize. I know it's hard. So our last question that we had on our survey: how many times has a teacher called home with the sole purpose of telling you about something that your child did well, or to say something that they love about your child? So years ago, I had a parent who I decided, this is like my first year teaching. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a phone call, just a good phone call. And I hadn't done it yet. This is like my first time doing it. So I pick a kid who's just, I mean, she's a rock star. She's in class early. She does all of her work. She's the type of kid where you could just not even be there. You could just leave the assignment on the desk and just write it on the board and she would just do it. Right? Just fantastic. And I'd make this phone call home. Parent picks up and she's like, hello. And I introduce myself and I'm from Mount Healthy Junior Senior High School. I'm calling about so and so. And there's just this pause. She doesn't know what to do. Like, and she's like, okay. And she, like, you can tell, like, she's freaking out. Like, you can tell that she has never had anyone call before. And I'm like, oh no, it's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing. I'm just calling to tell you that your kid is just awesome. Literally, just that's the only reason I'm calling is to tell you that whatever you're doing, you're killing it because your kid is just awesome. So, you have those parents who just never hear it, right? They just never hear it. So, our results: 63% of people who took this survey said that they have had zero phone calls in their child's career telling them only that their kid has done something good. 63%. 14% said one time. 14% said three or more. So there's a little gap there. I know that two times, for whatever reason, the percentage isn't showing, but a very small percent said two. So what's your thoughts on this? 63% said they'd never had this. What do you think?
I mean that's crazy.
Now
Um
remember, this is for the sole purpose, though, of only saying something good.
yeah. I mean, I it's difficult, to find the time as a
Mm-hmm.
teacher to find the time to do this because you are also, trying to juggle. We talk about all the different things you're trying to juggle, and unfortunately, those negative behaviors sometimes take precedent. Right? You're trying to stop those from happening, and you don't end up giving praise where praise is needed. Giving the kids credit for what
Mm-hmm.
they have done or achieved. Um, so it's difficult for sure. Something I did not do it this year actually, but every other year since I've been teaching, my first week of school, I call every single parent on my team, just to say like, hey, I'm so and so science teacher, and name one cool thing that they did this week or one thing like that I got to know about them. Like, oh, it was really nice to get to know that they like this or
Mm.
whatever.
Okay, I like that.
Um, just to start off the year,
Mm-hmm.
on the right foot.
Man, I'm still trying to learn
So
names at that point. I'm struggling. I'm struggling.
yeah, yeah. So I do that every year. So, but I understand that the time it takes to do that. It takes several hours, to get through all those phone calls.
And
So
I think also, like, the problem that you have is a lot of the phone calls that you have are you're trying to you're trying to work on a behavior, right? So sometimes positive phone calls are made to students who historically haven't been doing so hot, right? You have a kid who has been in trouble a lot, and then finally they do something really good or really cool, or they get a good grade or whatever it is. So you call and you're like, hey, I just want to let you know that so and so had a really good day today. Now, they didn't turn this in, but they still they're just doing better, right? So it's not only positive. So you end up spending time trying to work on a lot of the students, which I mean you should. Like if you have a student you're trying to turn around, that's a good thing. But at the same time, a lot of the kids who are just always good, they they get left out in the cold a little bit in terms of recognition. It's like the kid that you haven't seen in years, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember your name," like because I was screaming your name all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or the kid that is like, "Hey, Mr. Howard, how are you?" And you're like, "Oh God, like you were in my third bell, but I just remember a face because the only time I got your name was when I looked at attendance." Like that, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a shame. Like we should be spending more time trying to get to know kids and work with them, even if they're not always just a behavior problem, right? So yeah, I'll be honest. I thought this number would be higher. I thought more than 63% would say no. I was surprised. I am,
Really?
yeah, I am. I
Hmm.
think that from what I've seen, at least, and I'm included in this. At the end of the day, teachers are just it's the problem with it's like the problem with having seventh bell plan. Like if you have seventh bell plan or eighth bell or sixth bell or whatever, however many bells your school has, if you have the last bell plan, you very seldomly get things done because you're just dead by that point. You're exhausted. Like you've been on you've been on all day, if that makes sense. And now
Mm-hmm.
suddenly everything gets quiet, the kids all leave, and you shut down. You finally get a second to shut down where you don't have to be as aware. And it's really difficult during that moment to be like, oh man, I'm just gonna go make a phone call and have a conversation because you're just tired. So I'm surprised that only 63% said zero because I feel like a lot of teachers I would say that I don't want to call it rare, but I don't think it happens as often as it probably should, just calling and saying good things. I think more often than not, when 3 o'clock hits, if they have nothing to say, they have nothing to say. It was what happens a lot, right? Because it's like if you're going to make only a positive phone call, like you're going out of your way in a way. Does that make sense? You have to
Mm-hmm.
really that's putting in the extra. As my kids say, you're doing too much, right? Like you're try harding. Like that's the kind of the thing. Like it is, but it's. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should do these things, but it's hard.
Very
It's
difficult. Very, I agree. I agree with that. Like it takes time, it takes energy, and we have a limited amount of those resources.
yeah,
you know,
it's
uh,
and this is people will say there's no tired like teacher tired, and I don't know if that's 100% true. We still need to have a segment where we just go and do a different job for a day, like roofing or something, and then come home.
I
I
agree.
would be sunburnt to a crisp. I'd be like, oh no, put me back in the classroom. But yeah, I think it is something that that is very difficult for people to do. So we had a extra question. I've already read one of the responses from this, but we had an extra question where we asked, from a parent's perspective, what would you want teachers to know when it comes to working with parents? Um, so I got a lot of interesting responses to this. So the first one that I want to shout out, this person says, since I know how hard teachers work and the incredible amount of time they put into their jobs, in general, I work on the premise that no news is good news. However, if my child is performing below proficiency or misbehaving, I want to know. I'm here to help and I'm on your side. So, very positive. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
And I think that this is a sentiment that a lot of parents share, right? If my child's not doing well, let me know. Otherwise, I trust you and I trust my kid to both just do their job, right? I think that that's a fairly commonly shared sentiment. What do you think?
agreed. Agreed. I agree with that. I think for the most part, parents do trust that their teacher and the student are doing what they need to do, and that they, no news sometimes, like you said, is good
Mhm.
news.
And
So,
now on the flip side, I had a comment where somebody said, "We want to know good things as well as not good things. Also, we're interested in the social emotional goods and bads teachers see. Doesn't have to be a long report or a half-hour phone call. Could be a couple of emails throughout a whole school year with some observations. I'm sure it's dependent on parents whether that would be appreciated or not. For us with our early elementary student, we crave those observations so we can incorporate them into our instruction to our kids about the world." I think that that's pretty cool. And I agree, especially with early elementary, right? Like I said, my son's 4, and yes, I want to know, like, is he learning his ABCs? Is he doing those things? Is he learning to write his name? Is he learning to do those things? But right now, I think more often than not, my big worry is he making friends? Does he get
mhm.
along? Is he nice to people? Does he, is he, how does he interact with the other kids? Those are the things that I'm usually more interested in. Is he getting picked on? That's a big one, right?
That's a big
Yeah,
concern. Yeah,
yeah. So
absolutely.
I 100% understand this, and I agree that especially with young kids and middle school, because middle school is brutal. We need to be having those conversations, not just about academics, but also like whoever this was, social emotional behavior. We have to make sure that we're being as transparent about that as we can. I think that
Mhm.
that's a good one. And then the next one, that we like to know what's going on. We don't want to just hear from them if something's wrong. So another person on the positive phone call train, and not even necessarily the positive phone call train, just like, again, how are they doing with the other kids? Right? How are these things going? So I think it's something that we can all work on, and not just teachers, right? I think it's something that parents can work on in terms of like their interaction with teachers, because it's funny with me and my wife, with my son. I've already told her, like, when he gets in school, if a teacher makes a call home to us, I want to be the one to take the call. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, honestly, because I'm coming at it with a very specific perspective, right? If a teacher calls me and is like, "Hey, your son is doing this," I know from personal experience that teacher does not want to make that call, and they're not just doing it. At least from my experience, they're not just doing it because they want to get someone in trouble. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Mhm.
be like, I'm taking this teacher's side, and if he's like, "Well, I didn't do that," so I'm like, nope, I ain't buying it. So so
Yeah.
that's where I am with that. So I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, um, or a bad thing, but I do think that parents and teachers can both add a little something to make each other's lives easier.
Absolutely.
So I think we have almost reached the end of our segment. What I would really appreciate is if you guys would like, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful podcast things that we talk about. That would be fantastic. We also have social media channels: Facebook, Twitter, all those kinds of things. We would love for you to follow us on there as well. Next time on Brothers on the Board, we're going to have a special guest. That is the plan. We're going to be talking about teacher burnout. Why are so many teachers leaving the field? So we will see you next time on Brothers on the Board. Have a fantastic evening.